Welcome to another inspiring episode of the Elite Expert Insider Podcast. Hosts Melanie Johnson and Jenn Foster are the owners of Elite Online Publishing. They're both Wall Street Journal, USA Today best-selling authors. We're really glad you're here because this podcast was designed for you. Meet industry experts that share their secrets and strategies. Get successful results for your business in money, relationships, health, and your life. Each episode is going to inspire you to take action towards reaching your greatness.
Hey everyone, it's Melanie Johnson. I'm here with my business partner at Elite Online Publishing, Jenn Foster. Hi, Jenn.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Good. I hope everyone's having a terrific week so far this week. We want to remind you to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a message. We'd love to hear from you and share it with your friends because we always have something wonderful to learn and educate you about your business, your life. And also, if you're thinking about writing a book, becoming an expert in your field, remember to contact us and see if you're a good fit. Go to our submission page at eliteonlinepublishing.com, where we guarantee the authors that we choose will become #1 bestsellers, whether it's on Amazon or USA Today and Wall Street Journal. Well, let's get started. So we have a couple of things we're going to learn, a couple parts we're going to learn. We're going to learn about business, how to scale your business, taking a startup from like 20 people up to 400 people. That just blows my mind right there. And do you want to go to 400 people? And building your processes and systems. That's where so many businesses fall down. And have you ever thought of starting an app before? I mean, I know we have, but then we're like, I don't know how to do that. That's like a whole education process. Who do you hire? Who do you trust? How do you know? How do you make money with it? So that's a cool conversation we're going to have with Victor Wong today, who has done all of those things. So he is an expert that we're bringing you today. Victor, thanks for coming on our show.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Melanie. Hi, Jenn. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Awesome. Well, tell us, Victor, a little bit how you got into working in this company and a little bit of your background in that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for our listeners, if you haven't heard of Flipp, hopefully you'll get a chance to download it, or I pique your interest enough after this podcast to download it. I'm the CFO at Flipp Corporation. And if we're a free shopping app that helps shoppers provide for their families and make life more affordable. And then in terms of just my role in itself as a CFO role, it's an interesting one because it isn't necessarily your traditional head of finance only role. I also lead the company's strategy, both development and execution, and then also the operational effectiveness of the company. So just Jenn, as you kind of asked a little bit about my journey in Flipp. So being almost 10 years now, I think 10 years if I'm counting is October. So about one more month before I hit the 10-year mark at Flipp. I joined when I was about team member 21, if I recall correctly. I think that's the number, team member 21. So we're still very small. I don't think anyone's heard of us back in those days because we're a startup out of Toronto. And on the first day, I think what makes it even more unconventional was the first day the CEO came and said, I know we brought you in to run finance, but we also have an ops department that is lacking some leadership and management. So can you also run operations as well? So little did I know, I'm always up for a challenge, right? Little did I know how much I would enjoy kind of that topic that Melanie mentioned about scaling businesses. And that was kind of my first foray into helping build the team, but working as part of a cohesive team together to build something from, say, 21 person when I first joined to now a team member size of 400. So that's all been very interesting to journey through.
One of the things I know as a business owner ourselves is before you can scale, you really have to have your systems of operation. Otherwise, you're adding people and nobody really knows what they're doing and the house of cards start to fall. What do you think that you found are the most important operating systems that needed to be in place or were in place, but they weren't done the right way that you give advice to companies to do?
Yeah, it might sound odd to your listeners especially because we're a tech company. But when and you had mentioned this, the people, process, systems framework, system actually to me always comes last. It always comes last, and I'll explain why. There is when we start building out the team and the processes, it's really the team members and the intellectual property that really powers a business, especially at that early stage, right? Like you're not going to put in a system to automate something that you're still discovering. and the agility that people can offer, that's invaluable. Like that's why you have to have a great team. You need to have a great culture, and you really have to set that up right at the beginning. And then once you start getting bigger, then there are more people doing more things, right? And so then now you start to layer on processes, so people actually know how to coordinate together and work together to get the same objective done. I think one of the analogies that I really loved, and I'm not sure if either of you have ever tried or ever heard of a dragon boat. So it's this big long boat that 20 plus people go into, and there's usually a drummer at the front. And it's a race, right? It's always a race, right? With any of these things. And so we did this as like a team building activity, and I thought to myself, I'm like, this is like a perfect analogy on why some businesses just don't work. So you got 20 people on this boat, like 10 on each side, and everyone is paddling as hard as they can, like hardest they can. But there are some boats that go really far and really fast, and there's some boats that just sputter, right? And what that is because those 20 people weren't in sync. They weren't paddling together, right? They're paddling in like a similar direction, but I'm doing one stroke, the other person's doing another stroke, right? It's off time. And so no matter how hard we were going, paddling, how much effort we're putting, the boat wasn't really moving that much. It was moving, but it wasn't moving that much.
Right.
So this is where, hopefully that resonates with your listeners, but that's from a scaling perspective is absolutely necessary, because you want everyone, every minute that they spend working on a problem, working on your mission, working on the vision to be like productive, right? You don't want it to be unproductive or dealing with politics, etc. So this is where, like I said, people then process really comes in to help coordinate everybody so that we're still running towards the same thing. And then lastly, now that you've kind of figured out what to do, how to do it well, even manually, that's where you bring in the systems to now start to automate it, so that then the team can focus on the next kind of horizon, the next incremental thing to do. So that's the kind of the people, process, systems, and in that particular order.
That's great. And I love that you said the word automate, because a lot of times people have their systems in their company, but they're not automated. They're just, this is the system and we got to do the system every single time. So tell us a little bit about that automation process. Like, how can people automate better instead of just doing the same thing over and over again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that I want to employ for your listeners on that one is really around a continuous improvement mindset. Because oftentimes I hear it's like, okay, well, someone from top told me to implement the system, or like, this is the way I have to do things, or this is the memo I have to write, submit it to this individual, things like that, right? It's a process that was top down and no one really understands the why. Right. So to have a continuous improvement mindset is one where we always want to do better as a company. And each individual, it starts with the individual, and then it starts with the team, and then obviously it propagates out to the company. And with that in mind, the other thing that's critical to the mindset and the culture of the company for that to really be effective is that when we started Flipp, one of the things we looked at was, oftentimes when people talk about their company, even today I talked about it, right? And people really celebrate a large size organization, right? Like, I'm at 400. I was at 21, I was 400. And there is that gravitate towards the number of team members that are in there to actually, kind of equate the size and how successful a company is. Because obviously, if you can support a 400 person payroll, you're doing pretty well. But one of the things I do realize is when there is added layers of people, right? Like there's a management overhead that, going back to it, you're not really spending every single minute of your time now pursuing the company mission and vision. You actually have to do some people management, and I don't think you ever eliminate that, but you want to minimize that. And then the other thing I also find is I love working with people and seeing team members grow. But if you start adding layers and layers to the organization, the hierarchy, you can't. So going back to, I know it's a long way to get to your answer, Jen, but these are all the mindset things that are necessary for an automation kind of strategy to be successful. Like, people have to understand why we're doing it. And then also, people have to have that mindset. So I'll give you, for us specifically, we work with almost all the North American retailers to help out with their weekly ads. So anytime you go onto any of the retailer.com site and you click on their weekly ad, quite proud of this for us in the team. You scroll down to the very bottom, and at the bottom right-hand corner it says Powered by Flipp. You could do this on Walmart. You could do this on Home Depot. It'll all be there. And so with all those retailers, even mid-market retailers, small enterprise businesses, we work with all those retailers. When I did the math when I first joined on, based on our operating model, I would need like 400 people just to operationalize that. That was like the vision. That would have been the actual execution plan to get there. And I was like, okay, I really don't necessarily want to do that because of all those things I just mentioned, right? I don't want to have all that management overhead. I also want to see team members grow and succeed. So this is where we employed a mixture of automation, outsourcing at first, because to remind your listeners, this was 10 years ago. So we did some outsourcing to start. But once the technology caught up and we were quite familiar with what we wanted to accomplish with the process, then we started automating it. So it was more of like a waiting period for us, especially 10 years ago, for technology to catch up. But now I think the first conversation really starts with more like, what can we automate here? But the fallacy here, again, just as a caution, is don't ever start with just pure automation first, right? Yeah. Because you need to do it. Like you need to do it. Your team needs to do it. They have to understand what needs to be done, and then they can start outsourcing / automation processes. Because if you jump right to automation, there's a lot of investment to build technology that might not be suited to exactly what you needed to do. So work out the kinks. I guess the minister is like, work out the kinks and then start to automate. I think that's a very hopefully a realistic strategy that some of your listeners can employ.
You know what I'm hearing loud and clear is it really is the process. So get that process honed down before you move on to systems, technology, understand the process, do it manually, walk through the whole thing, just find the pros and cons of what you're doing, the do's and don'ts, and the people that you need to run those processes. And once you get the process, then you can do the other layers of that and decide what the best technology is, decide who the best people are. What about, we just did an interview with someone about VAs and things, and what about outsourcing? And how do you know what parts of your business to outsource and what not to?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because similar to automation, there's always that desire to like, let's just get everything out, right? Like it's the lure of cost savings can blind a lot of companies on like, hey, let's outsource everything. I think it's really about experience. It's really about your experience, specific experience with your, and I do call them partners, because they're not, they can be vendors, but I think you get to that really nice, happy spot when you start calling them partners, because regardless of what it is, someone's doing work for your business to make it run, right? Like regardless of how basic it is, because if they don't do it, then parts of your business aren't succeeding, right? Or else you shouldn't do this task at all or this project at all, right?
Right.
So you're depending on someone on the outside with potentially little to no experience, because you have to coach them, teach them, train them to do those projects, those tasks. So once you get to a good groove, and we do a lot of testing with our partners, right, on that side. Mm-hmm. And so we go through a rigorous process, and this is through learning, by the way. It's like this is not something like it's like, hey, day one, like we went to do outsourcing. Here's like a test package. Right. Go do it. Right. It was hopefully, and again, your listeners can learn from our mistakes, because we spent a lot of time kind of learning and iterating and changing. But it's really about, again, to Melanie, to your point about process, like what are these processes that you have internally? How does it look if it's not a person that works at Flipp or your company that does this? How does that look like? Is there any risk about confidentiality, security risk, all that stuff? You have to consider all that. And if that is all nice and good, then the ask is like, how do you break the task down to its simplest form, where one, it's prime for outsource, but then it's also prime for automation, right? So there's a potential two paths you can take. But because if it's complex, if it's like, hey, here's a piece of paper, take this and draw XYZ with it, right? And that's the task. That's pretty complicated. That probably needs a lot of coaching, and that's probably not a task that you want to outsource unless you can break that down to like take this piece of paper, go to the top right corner, draw X, go to the bottom right corner, draw a zero. Until you break it down into kind of manageable processes, understandable processes, I think that's where your project task, whatever you might call it, is ready for outsourcing. And then that's where I would say test with those partners to see how they do, because at the end of the day, you don't want to spend more time managing them, right? Then you would have someone internally, because that's like the fallacy, right? Like outsourcing is so simple. You just hand this package to someone else, they'll take care of it for you. It's not that easy. There is a bunch of investment work that the team has to do before it is successful.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about the app some more and kind of how to start an app. I know you came into the company. Did they have an app already? I mean, 10 years ago, I know technology's changed a lot in 10 years. And I'm sure, people, even me, I thought I had ideas and thought, oh, I could make an app out of that, but I don't even have a clue where to even start. And maybe having like a company first before you actually create the app for it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it kind of like brings me down memory lane on a lot of these things. So yeah, like 10 years ago, this was 2011. So surprisingly, I mean, the iPhone wasn't really that prevalent back then. To be quite honest, I'm definitely dating myself, but I actually had a BlackBerry coming into the company, right? And I'm not sure if any of your listeners even know what a BlackBerry is now anymore. And so mobile first wasn't really kind of even a concept that landed on our radar, to be quite honest with you guys. Like it wasn't something like was the grand master plan that we put this thing on an app. Like our initial journey through this whole kind of digital world was that we saw an opportunity where, again, the concept of weekly ads, circulars, they were all analog, right? They were all paper format. And we didn't think that was a great experience, right? It wasn't necessarily a really big thing to shoppers and consumers because it was always available. It's one of those things that, it's been around for, 20, 30 years, right? Like it's more like a staple of consumerism, right? Yeah. And so we saw an opportunity, as anything with the analog digital disruption, that there was an opportunity for us to be successful and do something better, right? So it's funny. I might even use some of these company names that again predates everything. But when I remember our first like investor pitch deck, we would say we're like Maps and MapQuest. Like no one's ever probably heard of MapQuest anymore. It's like Google Maps, right? It's like Maps and MapQuest, and then like classifies.
MapQuest was a thing.
Classifies and Craigslist, right? So Craigslist, I think, is still around. But we want to be like Flyers and Flipp. So that was our first foray into digital, to be quite honest with you and your listeners. So it wasn't on mobile, but what we saw was as the popularity of the phone picked up. I think it was really around iPhone like 4, if I recall correctly, like Steve Jobs' announcement and all that stuff. That started picking up popularity. Also, the technology had to catch up because if you guys recall, this like, hey, you could get 50 gigs, 100 gigs, unlimited gigs on your mobile phone now, right? Like I was on a BlackBerry. We were talking about like 1 megabyte for like emails, right? So the tech infrastructure wasn't even ready for like high media consumption on the phone. So that's why that was not part of the master plan, because we did not foresee that. But once we saw that announcement on the iPhone and started seeing the adoption, we saw it as another avenue for us to get our message out to shoppers and consumers. So that's like the business and the market reasons why we built the app is really another channel, because we knew that seeing the trend, and hopefully we could say that we were like early adopters and early understanders of mobile phones, but we knew that was one of those things that was going to be invaluable for consumers. Like no one's going to carry their laptops everywhere, for leisure at least, but everyone's going to take their phone with them. And we want to have that capability to deliver that weekly shopping experience through the circulars onto someone's phone so they can take it with them. So that's how we actually came about. Hopefully that doesn't don't spoil any things on your side. But yeah, it wasn't like a magical master plan that we had to build an app.
Well, I love it. You took something that's analog. Like I've just been recently spending time at my parents' house and they still get the newspaper. I haven't gotten the newspaper for probably 12 years at least.
Yeah.
And, the flyers with the coupons that come in and you'd search through all those. And basically you took something that's analog, the old school way of getting things, and made it new school with making it tech and not just on the computer, but on the phone. And I think for anybody listening, if you see something or something in your business that is still analog, how to make it high tech and transform it not just to the computer, but also an app to have those other things. I mean, we've looked at our business. Do we need an app? Is an app appropriate for our business? And for some businesses, it is absolutely. And other businesses, no, they don't necessarily need an app for their business. People can still just go to their website. So how do you know if your company needs an app or not? Like yours was pretty clear that you guys definitely need an app. Would you have advice for anyone? Like, how do you know?
Yeah, I think there's actually a couple of things, and even on the technical side, being on the web browser itself, because the mobile phone has been so adaptive into these concepts, is that there are even like mobile ready sites that are quite intuitive, right? They're quite app-like, and so for the ease of just someone starting, by all means, start off with a website that is actually mobile ready. And start there and like test and understand where your consumer interactions are. The app functionality, though, one of the things I can offer to say is you can have an increased level of interaction between the user and your app much more than, say, a browser can. And so with that in mind, like, do you need that additional functionality? Like, is that going to improve the user experience? I think that's where the app question really comes in. It's like, user experience, is it better, right? Is it going to improve their journey through your app? Is it going to improve the utility? If the answer to those are no, then maybe just having a mobile ready web version of your kind of product is sufficient.
Is there any SEO advantage? Like if they search your company, the app comes up as well as your website, so it's generating more visibility for you?
Yeah, there are some because the more channels that you're on, the more availability, right? Like just the fact that we have a website, that's one. If you have a website and an app, I mean, I'm doing very simple math here. There's two. So just by even just a function of that, yes, you're absolutely right. There's some searchability involved. Mm-hmm. And it depends on also what category that you play in, right? Because if all your competitors or even just your complement kind of companies that you work with in the ecosystem, if they all have apps, then maybe it's one of those things where if you don't have an app, you're kind of missing out, right? So there's also that consideration involved. Yeah. And so a whole confluence of things depending on where your business is at and what kind of market they play in.
Yep. Jen, do you have something?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I was trying to get it unmuted. Yeah, I actually wanted to talk really quick before we wrap up. I saw that you are also in charge of the eco committee at your work, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how business owners today can be eco-friendly and think about the green. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing there.
Yeah, so it's actually been a bit of a challenge for us on the eco team, given the kind of home experience through the pandemic, right? So it's a bit of a challenge because a lot of the the eco days where we have Earth Days where we go and do park cleanups and all that. We've tried to do individual ones because obviously the group gatherings aren't encouraged, at least not currently, or large group gatherings aren't encouraged currently. But I think one of the mantras for us still remains was because it's not really about hand slapping someone that they accidentally put their garbage into the recycling or the recycling in the garbage, right? That's not the whole point. But the whole point that we just as a team that we developed was really around education, right? Because maybe you think, and for some reason, I don't know how it is in your neck of the woods, but like the recycling system as as sophisticated as it might be, it's still very complicated on like, should this go here? Should that go there? Right. And the complication doesn't really help with ease of use. Right. And so we try to do a better job educating even just the tactical nature of like how to sort your goods. But I think the other thing is more of the education and kind of a reminder that it's we're doing this not for ourselves, but for the future generation, right? Because in a previous generation, they left us with what we currently got. But if we continue to not care about it, I have two young boys, 10 and 7. If we don't do our parts right now for protecting the environment, then like what are they looking at, right? I know obviously from the news articles and all that, like the weird weather patterns all over the world has impacted us in some shape or form. They're obviously non-believers of whether that is environmentally impacted, but I mean, if we should still do right by us and by future generations. Yeah, either way. So that's where the eco community plays a role. It's just we try to do a lot more like home education now, including like some tips and tricks on like energy savings and things like that. Because like at the office, especially, like no one uses it, turn off the lights, right? Same thing at home. So, like do your part and try to make everything sustainable. So.
Well, thanks for coming by today, Victor. That was awesome. You gave such great advice for scaling your business, for creating processes about your company. And I can't wait to check it out because I didn't know about Flipp. So I looked at the website and I'll be getting the app. And I used to be a coupon shopper. So there you go.
Awesome. That's great. That's great.
Tell us where we can go for the link to get to the app.
Yeah. So it's... even though it's pronounced Flipp, it's actually with 2 P. So I think that's the differentiator or the confuser on the other side. So it's FLIPP. And if you search that on either the app stores, you will find it or even online.
Awesome. We'll put the links up in the show notes as well as on YouTube. And thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, thank you both. It's been great chatting.
Terrific. Well, we'll see you next time here. Remember to subscribe to our podcast. And if you're looking to become a best-selling author, make sure you go to our submission page and fill out our form and see if we're a good fit for you. EliteOnlinePublishing.com. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full-spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at EliteOnlinePublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.